Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Miller, your host. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Farm to Plate. They are creating tomorrow's food business ecosystem today. You can find out more at farmtoplate.io. Our guest is really interesting. He is the CEO of Ingredient Brothers. I have Eran Mizrahi with me, and he's going to talk to us all about what his company does. Welcome to the podcast, Eran.
Hi, Pam. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, we are so glad to have you with us. Ingredient Brothers it sounds self-explanatory, but why don't you tell us what your focus is as a company?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple, I'd say it's an unsexy business is what people tend to call it. We're not one of those big tech companies, but what we're trying to do is just improve the way people source ingredients throughout the world. I think both my partner, Alap, and myself, when we were in the field buying, a lot of ingredients all the time from different places, different sources, importing our own ingredients. We always saw a need for a better platform to allow buyers to get access to great ingredients, right? Not just great ingredients, but great ingredients that come with all the right compliance, the right pricing, the right consistency, and the right logistics and supply chain, services that surround it. So we started Ingredient Brothers about 2 years ago, and it's been a really, really fun journey since then.
Yeah, and I love to talk to entrepreneurs who have founded their business based on something they observed in their previous work life or experience. They just saw a need that needed to be filled. And it sounds like that's the case with you and your partner.
Yeah, I mean, I've had two jobs. I, came to the US about 10 years ago for graduate school. I've had two roles since, coming here. And the first was at a meal kit startup, and the second was at a company called nuts.com. And, the patterns were very similar in terms of where I thought that there was opportunity. And it just, I'm a finance guy. I look for information asymmetry. Like, where is there less, where someone else has really a lot more information than the other person? I felt like in this space, the suppliers or distributors tend to have a lot of information. It's really hard for the customer to get all that information, or at least it's not easy to get and absorb that information. So how can we build a platform that does that and reduces some of that friction? Because, we're trying to give people access to the world's best ingredients, as well as, find manufacturers that are doing incredible things and give them a platform for growth, right? And the US is an incredible platform for growth. People are desperate to sell into the US market. The US food market is insane, for lack of a better word.
Okay, we'll have to find out a little bit about that.
Yeah, but so how do we, democratize the whole process and make it easier for everyone, which in turn helps us build a really great business.
Yeah. So, what are some of the main focus points for you as a company as you try to meet those needs that you saw?
Yeah, so I think, the obvious one is the first is compliance. There has been a lot of change, in the last, you call it 20 years. I haven't been here for 20 years, but it feels like for the last 20 years, there's been a lot of significant changes in the regulatory environment in food. I think you continue to see that push, not only in just the regulatory aspect of it, but so many different certifications that people are going after: upcycling, gluten-free, vegan, GMO, animal cruelty. There's so many different certifications that have to happen that a lot of the older importers who come from a world where these things didn't matter, right? And you didn't need compliance, and you were just bringing things in and storing them and selling them to whoever needed. That became a big focus of ours, because that was a big gap that we saw ourselves. And so we spent a lot of time building out our QA process. And, I was taking someone through the onboarding of an ingredient that we do ourselves. And it is phenomenal. There are so many steps to sourcing one coconut. And so, that the QA aspect is definitely a big focus of ours, as well as like logistics and moving of the product, and how do we give our customers more transparency into our supply chain. And, we fundamentally believe that if we're able to do that, then we can reduce their inventory risk, allow them to, let's say, operate a little bit leaner, because they've got better information with regards to like how much inventory we have, in our warehouses, how much is on the water, how much is at, production. And that also helps our manufacturers. If we're able to facilitate that information back to our manufacturing partners, they can become real strategic partners. And I think now, a lot of the times, like, even though people have, in inverted commas, strategic relationship with their suppliers, that sometimes ends at like a handshake. It doesn't really begin with like transferring of knowledge consistently to improve to improve the process for the end customer, and in turn, like, help everyone grow again, right? And I think
Yeah.
we're trying to build that end-to-end communication channel.
Okay. Eran, you said a lot just then. I want to
I
unpack
talk
a
a lot.
little bit of that. No, there's some really great things. Well, first of all, quality assurance and that whole compliance piece is more stringent now than it ever used to be,
Yeah.
to your point. And I think the days are almost gone. The handshake that really, like you're talking about, between the farmers and the people that are buying from them and along the way, that's starting to go by the wayside, because we need to have contracts. We need to have a guarantee that the product that you're supplying is actually what you say you're giving us, and all of those checkpoints along the way. So that whole focus on quality assurance that I know Ingredient Brothers is really, that's paramount, from what you were saying about your company, that you're really paying attention to that. But the other thing is that whole accessibility of information. Where is the product? How
Yeah.
much is the manufacturer? They need to plan what they're doing production wise. Is how much is on the water? How much is, in transit? How much is on a truck? How, depending on what might be happening. I think that's all really critical. And so that's a lot of what you're providing.
Yeah, and you saw, obviously, with the pandemic, what that did when suddenly you don't have plans and you have disruptions in supply chains. And if you're not able to react quick enough, or aren't able to, sound the alarm and make sure that you have processes in place to take action, you can land in a situation that, leaves your business vulnerable. And so, I think a lot of people, thankfully, have learned from that. You shouldn't take this for granted, that goods are just going to be there, and that you will have availability of things. Like, there are important questions you need to ask your suppliers, and you need to be consistently following up and understanding, with data, not just like a yes, that they have your best interests at hand, and that they are looking out for you. And I think a lot of the time we spend is firefighting, because supply chain is never perfect, and there's always something always is going wrong. From one day to the next, something will happen. But our job is to firefight those and make sure that the customer doesn't think about it, right? It's the analogy I always give is like going to a 3 Michelin-star restaurant. Something's come in looking bad. Someone's been sick, but at the end of the day, someone's walking in, and that's their once in a lifetime experience, that it needs to go well. And so, our job is to be in that kitchen and making sure that we're delivering the goods, and we're doing whatever we can, whatever's possible, to make sure that the person who's getting the experience at the end of the day is getting a really seamless experience, and doesn't have to stress about where their coconut milk is.
Yes, I like the analogy to firefighting, because essentially that is a lot of what you're doing. You're trying to make it so that they get what they need. And I think that your global footprint, as far as supply chain, I've made this joke before, the average citizen across the world, I don't think ever thought about supply chain, worried about supply chain,
Yeah.
maybe didn't even use supply chain in any conversation they ever had, until it impacted them, which has
Correct.
been more recently. And
Yes.
so we are having conversations about that, and they're realizing that issues to be solved that have been solved in the background before, that have been pushed to the foreground. I see with Ingredient Brothers is your global perspective, and maybe you can share a little bit about how you have your fingers in a lot of different countries across the world, so you are giving your customers options.
Yeah, I mean, we very early on decided that we were going to build a team that was truly global and truly remote. And so we have people all over the world working for us. So we actually just got together last week for the first time, which was a whole supply chain nightmare on its own. But we have teams in South America, we have people in Southeast Asia and Africa, and having one, like you said, different perspectives on how to solve different problems is super powerful. And having people, close to the source allows us to react a lot quicker. And so I think, that has given us a nice advantage as we built the business. But we also are not afraid to import from many different countries. And so in our short 2 years, we've imported from, I think it's around 15 different countries. And you learn lessons and unique things about each shipping lane, each trucking lane, each supply, each manufacturing process that translates to others. And so I think that
Yeah.
overlap and that, knowledge sharing has been incredibly powerful and has allowed the team to become extra and really resilient to any problems that they may face.
Yeah, but footprint that you have and people in all these different countries with the different perspectives, let's not lose track of the benefit there. You're making the data available, integrated analytics along with shipping information, along with customer information. Maybe you could share a little bit about that, because we love to talk about technology here at Future Foodcast. That,
Yeah.
I think, is a lot of what's benefiting the food industry now and is going to continue in the future.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think, one thing we realized, having worked in the industry, is a lot of times you find that there are many systems that companies have operate their business. And so they'll buy a CRM system to manage their customers, they'll buy a QA system to manage their food safety, they'll buy an ERP system to manage their vendors, they'll buy all these different systems. And what lands up happening is that information stays within certain silos. And that is, can be dangerous, and it makes access to information incredibly hard. But what we did very early on was like, okay, we're going to solve one problem, which is importing of ingredients from around the world. We're not trying to build technology to change anything else. We're not trying to import anything else. We're not trying to start the next e-commerce company. What we're trying to do is make the movement of goods as simple as possible. And so, by doing that, we effectively build one singular platform, which gives our sales team access to all the QA data and allows them to get, have transparency around the QA data. It gives our QA team really great transparency into who our customers are, what they do, and how they operate. Reduce so many of those barriers, and you bring a lot of overlap between the different functions. It really gives everyone a slightly different perspective. It allows you to move really fast, which we really like. It allows us to move incredibly fast, and it allows us to give our customers information much quicker than necessarily would have had in the past. And there's less, let's say, red tape in moving information across different systems and getting certain things for different people in different parts of the process. And so that we did not set out to build technology. I have an aversion to building technology, more about, always in the buy versus build department, but then stumbled upon certain like easy to use coding platforms, and it started to morph into something, a system of its own. And it's been really, really beneficial. And we recently went through an audit, and they were, really impressed with like what we were able to do. And it was really just about keeping it simple and keeping all the information in one central place. And that I think those two things alone really helped us.
Well, aren't you going through some different processes right now? I have some different certifications.
Yeah, exactly.
Explain what that is.
Yeah, we decided, we brought on a head of QA a year ago, and we challenged her to really think outside the box. And she discovered that the BRC, which is globally recognized standard across mainly food manufacturing, where they will go in and they give you the guidebook on what you should be doing, and then you will get independently audited by, let's say, SGS, which is a big auditing firm. They'll come in and check that you've implemented BRC standards across manufacturing. And that is what I would say 90% of our, or 95% of our suppliers will subscribe to that. But then in the import space, once the goods move from manufacturer to importer, there isn't any certification. And so a lot of our customers were relying on our suppliers' documentation, but no one was coming into Ingredient Brothers and saying, hey, what is your recall policy? How often do you test it? When a customer complaint comes in, what does that process look like? How do you test it? When you get a request for a new ingredient, how do you verify the risk? What are the standards you're looking at? How do you build your own internal risk profile of that ingredient? And what are you doing to mitigate that risk? And so we found that the BRC does offer like an importer's certificate called agents and brokers. And there's like 20 that are certified in the US, as mainly big companies. And we decided to put a very aggressive challenge to the QA team and said, let's do this. In 1 year, we're going to be certified. And we've just gone through our audits. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what we got until it's like signed and sealed, but it's looking promising. But yeah, again, we're trying to push things a little bit, trying to do things a bit better, trying to, think into the future and say, well, one, these things really matter. And so how do we show our customers, how do we show everyone else out there, this is the, stamp of approval, as well as our commitment to continuing to, improve, because food safety is not a, point in time. It's a continuous, has to be in your veins all the time in order for you to live by it effectively.
Yeah. always vigilant on the food safety. That's for
Yeah.
sure. You definitely want to be focused on that. And good for you to be proactive about, pursuing these kinds of certifications that just give you more credibility with those you're doing business with, and the feet on the ground information that they need, and you're verifying that, and you're asking outside agencies to come in and audit. If I'm looking for a company to do business with, that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. One of the other things that you mentioned at the very beginning, when you went through several things
Yeah.
about what you're doing as a company, you mentioned about pricing and trying to figure out about that, because that's a challenge as well when you're trying to, it's a changing commodities market, right?
Yeah.
So talk about that, the balance that needs to be struck there, how you keep track of who's paying what, or what you've paid before. I don't even
Yeah.
know all that's involved. You're the
Yeah,
expert.
yeah, and I think that's again, I like to give analogies. I'm a storyteller, and like the thing I always say to people is, if you're buying 1 kilo of almonds and I give you half an hour to figure out where to buy them from, and you sit down at your computer, you'll be able to build me a matrix of all the different online stores that sell almonds, the different certifications, when I can get them, what are the different pack sizes. And then if I go and tell you to buy 40,000 kilos of almonds and I give you a month, like, you likely will still not have the right answer. And I think that is very telling for the industry. And I think, we don't have the solution yet. From what we're doing to try and be better, we have we're definitely collecting a lot of data. And so we're, using the technology we have to really collect and start to understand how these prices move. We're sourcing a lot of new things that we've never sourced before, really trying to understand how they move. But then on the other side of it is really taking a long-term view to our customers, and trying to sacrifice short-term profit over long-term company growth, and building a business that is fair, and that we all have to make money at the end of the day. Like, if I go and take every penny out of my supplier, well, they're not going to be incentivized to work with me. And so there is a margin that they want to operate in, there's a margin that I want to operate in, and I think ensuring that I operate within those bounds with integrity, building the relationships with our customers around that. It sounds simple, and it's like, oh, well, if you ever, that's easy to do. I think you'd be surprised at, how many companies, or because they're so resource constraints on the procurement and sourcing side, land up paying, probably more than they should for certain ingredients, because they just don't have the time to do the research and figure out, like, how much should I be paying for something, and like, what does that process look like? So, we try and really hold ourselves accountable to some, let's say, yardstick on, like, what we're prepared to make on things. And right. Are we going to one day be super transparent? Yeah, I hope we can get to that. I think we're too small right now to just open our open everything up. We need to understand a little bit more of how the market works. But yeah, I would love to make it feel like you're walking into Costco. It's like, I think it's the best feeling when you walk into Costco, because just know when you take the olive oil off, like, that's what you should be paying for olive oil. And so as long as you're okay with the price, like, that's it. And like, that's a good feeling. Whereas if you walk into a car dealership, you walk out and you just bought a car and you just don't feel good about it. So
not
like,
so much.
Yeah.
Well,
and so
am I hearing, so let me translate a little bit. Am I hearing you're talking about maybe taking the long view with your customers? So maybe you're going to forego a little short-term profit that you could gain. However, it would be at the customer you have, maybe taking more risk, or maybe getting in a price range that is not as comfortable for them, versus, meeting them part way in order to build that long-term partnership. Is that?
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay.
I think, we look at both our suppliers, our people that work for us, as well as our customers as stakeholders in the business, and not those need to be in balance. As long as we feel in balance with those, I think we will be able to build a really good business. And I think it's really easy to just increase your price by 5 cents and, make a little bit more money at the end of the day. But, keeping that equation in balance, I think, gets you over the long term. I think it's not the only recipe for success, but it is one of the recipes that I think can lead to success.
Well, and I also think that whole value equation, it can become a price war, but then, there's a bigger picture. It's not just the bag of almonds that you were using before. I mean, it's what goes around that, the data you're providing, or the certification that you're giving, and the QA that you're doing. And so that whole value equation really needs to be taken into account when companies are looking at. So if you can, I see what you're saying, like, if you can work on the price piece of it to still provide excellent value, and maybe more than somebody else at the same price or a very close price.
Yeah.
You're really looking for that longer term partnership with
Correct.
your clients.
Exactly that. And
I
build
think
that
all of
trust.
us like that.
Yeah,
If you
I
have the
agree.
right client, you know what I mean? That right client where you you really work together well and they become a trusted partner. You're a trusted partner of theirs. They'll come to you first for their ingredients before they go searching the market because
Yeah,
you've
I think
already
you said
proven
it
yourself.
very well at the beginning, which is like when the values aligned. And I think that is super important. And
Yeah.
the market is very big. You don't have to work with everyone. But when you
Right.
find people where the values align, and we have certain customers like that where like the values are really aligned, I think it's a very meaningful and rewarding relationship. And so everyone can win.
Nice initiatives you have going on at Ingredient Brothers. And I like the fact that you're filling a void that you saw and just meeting a need that needed to be met. I mean, and I'm glad that there are customers out there that are realizing that as well, as you gain more traction and you've already got a good business going, but as you continue to expand with those customers. And thank you for sharing that with us. Is
Thank you
there
so much.
anything, you're welcome, but is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we go today?
I mean, I think for food, the one thing I'd say is ask the questions. And now with ChatGPT, you can figure out pretty easily what questions to ask. I think that a lot of times, there is, even if you go into our website, it's not very easy to see all the processes that we have and all the things that we do to source and maintain, and I think that does hurt us because, people maybe don't value the service as much as they should. But at the same time, like, I would say, until we get to that place where everything is super transparent, like I would challenge customers to ask the questions and, try and understand, what it is that this importer is doing for you and what are the different processes and processes that they have in place, compliance that they have in place. And there are many, many amazing importers in the US, and there are some that aren't as amazing. And I think if you learn to ask the right questions, you can decipher those. And I think that will make for a better food supply chain for everyone.
Well, thanks again, Eran, for sharing the Ingredient Brothers perspective on a business. And I want to tell our listeners that if you enjoyed this interview with Eran and some insight into his business and would like to hear more, please subscribe to us on YouTube or on your favorite podcast channel. And we look forward to bringing you another episode next week.
Thanks so much, Pam.